What's going on, everyone? It's Bales, and welcome back to another episode of AFL Fantasy Head-to-Head, where we put two players up against one another to see who will be picking out of two players. This is episode number 22 of the series. We got 3 more episodes after this to go of the 25-episode series. If you haven't checked out the other 21 episodes, please make sure that you do that and, like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But joining me is another special guest to chat through a couple of premium midfielders. It is DT Talk's very own, and he's got his own podcast, SportsbyFry. Fry, mate, how are you?
I'm good, Bales. Thanks for having me, mate. We were talking just before. I've been avidly consuming these compare the pairs, and I think a head-to-head of the blokes that we're about to talk about. It's a little bit left field, but I'm excited that fantasy's just around the corner.
Yeah, all I could think of when you said compare the pair was same age, same income, same super contribution. Like that whole thing. If you know, for people out there. So, but mate, you are the rookie expert. We're not talking about rookies today. We're going to be talking about a couple of premium midfielders in Darcy Parish and Christian Petracca. A little bit sort of unique in terms of ownership and stuff. That we'll get into the numbers in a sec. But I'll be taking Darcy Parish, and I'll talk about him first, with being the more expensive player, just ahead of Chris Petracca, who Fry will be taking. And we'll be chatting through the two players to see who we're picking out of the two. So let's start off first. I'm just getting up the ownership numbers so then I can sort of reference that. I do like referencing that at the start of the episode. So we've got Darcy Parish here, priced $965K, has a current ownership of 2%. So very lowly owned there. And then Christian Petracca is $957K with 5.62% ownership. So a couple more there, but I think a few people are probably scared off by that opening round buy. But Darcy Parish, so we know Darcy Parish is an interesting player to sort of chat about, because when you think of Parish, he gets a lot of the ball right, but the thought that I had towards him was he doesn't actually get a lot of marks or tackles. But last year he actually had his career high in marks and tackles average per game. So he averaged 4.3 marks a game, 4.3 tackles a game. So when I'm thinking, okay, well, he's going to get 30 touches a game, essentially averaged, He averaged 30.9 touches a game last year. That's obviously good. You're going to get near that 100. But what's going to help you get over the 100 is those marks and tackles. And the guy averaging 8.6 of those per game is pretty good from last year. So he had an average of 106.9 last year. So the question is, can he get those marks and tackles to go up and over that 110? I think in terms of the tag, I don't see him being the guy that's going to get tagged. I think Zach Merritt is the number one tag target there. Maybe Nick Martin, if he becomes that sort of halfback flanker that sort of we're talking about. Obviously, he was on yesterday's episode with DT Lem. If you haven't checked that episode out, make sure that you do that. But maybe he gets a bit of tag attention this year. So I think Parish there's no worries about him being tagged. I think he's going to sort of roam free. And we did see, I believe it was 2021, where he sort of went on that sort of massive tear. Yeah, I've just got like scores up here. Like he's had some scores from, I think it was round 6 onwards, where I'll just read out some of these big scores here. Like he got a 150, 117, 131, 144, 122, 160, 115, 143, 128. And they're all and then was that a 120? Yeah, 122 in the final game of the season as well. So some massive scores there. And I don't exactly know what his average there, but it would have been, I think it was over 120 from memory from when I worked it out. Like I haven't got the exact number in front of me, but I believe it was over 120. So he's on an absolute tear. So for the questions that I'll throw to you with Darcy Parish is, can he get back to being a 110 to 115 guy and have those extra marks and tackles that we need to be that guy that would make him a worthwhile pick in fantasy this year?
It's tricky. I think he can. I think he's a gun player of the competition. Like you said, he's a walking 30 disposals more often than not. He was actually number 1 in centre clearances per game last year. Obviously had his calf injury that held him back a bit, but I think, he's not super old. He's 26 off the top of my head. So I think he's someone that and Zach Merritt, he's probably like their 1B in their midfield, especially from a fantasy standpoint. And actually, Christian Petracca is probably the same when Clayton Oliver's fit. So I don't think that there's too much doubt about what Darcy Parish can do. He hasn't traditionally maybe had all those marks and tackles that you really want from him to average 110 plus. I actually pounced on Parish as soon as he was healthy after his calf injury last year. And from memory, he had 3 or 4 120s almost straight out of the bat. So I think he is a player that has a complete fantasy repertoire. He isn't a known goal kicker, but he's quite a damaging inside midfielder. So I don't have too much of concern when it comes to picking Parish, despite what some of his previous numbers suggest. And like you said, we've seen big purple patches from him before when he puts up some ridiculous stats. There was the year that you mentioned, I'm pretty sure anytime there was a medal up for grabs, he took the 3 votes. He won the bloody Anzac Day medal. Then there was another random one down in Tassie or Hobart from memory. So we know that he's capable of putting up those 130, close to 140 point outings. And I think, in a midfield that has him and Merritt and then a lot of other unknowns, call it, I think Parish is still pretty safe to put together another pretty solid fantasy season this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I've just got numbers here. So, like, you would have brought him in around that round 16 mark, which was his second game back from the calf injury. And he got 125, 126, 93, 108 in his following 4 games. Then even to finish the season as well, he went 93, 113, 112, 96, 112. So the only thing sort of in that sort of back part of the year was he just wasn't getting the numbers to push him over the 120. So, like, in the final game of the season, he did have 4 marks and 9 tackles, which is good to see. Had a fair 16 handballs, though, in that game. And a lot of games here where he actually was able to have like a few marks and tackles, which that's been the knock on him before, is he gets a lot of the ball, but he doesn't do some of the hard stuff and get that out. He gets the outside ball, but he doesn't take those marks per se. But last season, especially the back half, he started to up those numbers. So whether we see that or not into this season is going to be one thing sort of to note. So do you see him going? If you had to project an average, what do you see him going? I've probably got him about that 105 to 109 sort of type range. And if I see those marks and tackles sort of either maintain or go up, I could see him going 110, but I got him in that sort of just below. So have you got him about the same, or have you got him?
Yeah, I think he'll be, in the conversation for a top 8 spot, but probably around the similar mark you've said. He averaged, 107, 106.9 last year. So I wouldn't expect a huge dip, but I don't think he's got a lot of room for growth from that point as well. So both him and Petracca were the guys that you're picking. You pick one of them, you're hoping that they can stay there for the whole year. And I think I have a little bit more faith in his consistency and ability to put up those big fantasy scores. But yeah, it's a tricky one because as I mentioned before, they're almost the second banana in that midfield, both respectively. So I've got confidence in Parish putting up another 105-point season. Just going to be a bit of a matter of how low his floor is compared to how high his ceiling is.
Yeah, and they're in both of them, and we'll start moving to Christian Petracca in this part as well. But the funny thing with these two players is they're in a little bit of an awkward sort of price range, because you got 40, 50K less. You've got your Butters, you've got your Jack Steels, your LDUs, and you keep going down, obviously, 100K, and you've got like a few people are keen on like a John Newcombe or even a Toot Miller, for example. And then if you go up a little bit, you've got your Rory Ledge, you've got your Andrew Brayshaws, you've got Tom Greens, Errol Gouldens. They're not too far above, and people look at those. So and then Rosie's probably in the same bracket as well, but I think a few more people are keen on Rosie potentially over these two. So it's a bit hard with these two, but we'll move to Christian Petracca now. And Fry, why should people be looking at Christian Petracca for their sides in 2024?
Well, I've had Christian Petracca in a keeper league for about 3 or 4 years now, and when I drafted him, I was adamant that one of these years he'll get forward status. He leads the comp in score involvements. He always seems to be that link-up player for Melbourne. Hasn't come to fruition, and I don't really think that he's a genuine chance to get forward status this year, but he's the Brownlow archetype, your rugged inside midfielder, can kick 3 goals in a quarter and swing a game. I think if we were starting an actual AFL side, we'd probably both pick Christian Petracca in our teams. I think he's a bit more wow factor, jumps off the page, and he's had 3 straight years now averaging 100 plus from a fantasy standpoint. I do wonder, again, how much more room he has for growth. He's only a little bit older than Parish, but he's not exactly past it. So I think he's at his ceiling. So I think that Christian Petracca will probably have another similar 105, 106 type season. So that might deter some coaches as well, as you mentioned, with the early buy coming up. So I think there's a lot of plus and a lot of upside in picking Christian Petracca. But if I'm going for someone like that, who is going to miss one of the early games, I'd probably want him to be a bit more unique. 5.5% is a pretty high ownership for someone of his caliber. I thought it might have been a bit lower because, like you said, they're almost in the ghost town of when it comes to price. You either go up to Bont or Laird or Brayshaw, or you go down and you hunt for the value in Steele or Walsh if he's fit, Zach Butters. So I was surprised to see that there's 5.5% of coaches jumping on him, but there's definitely reasons why they're picking him. Again, like I said, I don't think he's missed a game for the last couple of seasons as well. So, durability is a factor when it comes to picking your initial fantasy side. So there's a lot of upside to picking Christian Petracca, but from a scoring standpoint, I don't know if we're going to see a ton of growth from him either.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's the ghost town. It's that these guys are priced around that 105, 106, 107. If you're picking these guys, you're really wanting them to go to 110 plus to have that upside, because the guys just above, let's use Andrew Brayshaw and Rory Ladd as examples, where they're priced around that 110 mark. Most people think that they're pretty, not shoo-ins, but they're very likely to go 110 or more. Like they're very consistent with what they do. Whereas you and if you go a bit lower, like a Jack Steele, for example, a lot of people quite high on him thinking he can get back to that 105 worst case, but 110, 115 sort of range, 115 being the best case. I think for Jack Steele, I don't know if he's going to do the 120 or whatever. Like me and Luke were chatting about Steele in that episode. Again, if you want to check that episode out against Toot Miller, make sure you do that as well. But the thing with Petracca is, if we did this episode 3-4 weeks ago, we would have been maybe a bit higher on him, because we would have thought, Oliver's going to be out for however many weeks. But we've seen Oliver played, I think it was across 3 quarters last Sunday. Not the Sunday just gone. This was Tuesday. Not the Sunday just gone, the one before. He played against Richmond in the practice game and just had a lazy 17 touches in 40 minutes of footy. So not too bad for sort of your first sort of real hit out for a long time. So with Oliver being back, how do you see Petracca's role, and what do you think they'll do with scoring? Do you see him playing more in the midfield and complementing Oliver with Melbourne sort of struggles in that, or are you maybe think he might go a bit more forward potentially? And you said you weren't keen maybe on forward stats, but he might just sneak around the mark there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm hopeful of it. I think his role is pretty established in that D's midfield. Like I said, he's a dominant inside bull, and they did obviously lose a lot of experience from that midfield, likes of Billings, Harms. Billings arrived, but there's a couple of other pieces that have left in the off-season. James Jordan.
Yeah, Harms, obviously Brayshaw retiring as well.
Yeah, so there are going to be some magnets moved a little bit, and they might shuffle some things, which might see Petracca start more on the half-forward line, because like I said, he has shown that he can be quite damaging front of centre, and I think the Ds are really, especially after their straight set exits, they're really eager to make sure that they capitalise on putting points on the board when it matters in those tight contests in the finals. So maybe in the finals we see Petracca deployed a bit more forward. Maybe it happens throughout more of the regular season, but I do think that his role is established as an inside bull. And if Clayton Oliver's there, perfect. They have 2 guys that they'll be primarily used at the CBAs. Tom Sparrow's another one who might see a little bit of a bump in his scoring and his role for the Ds in the midfield. But I don't think Petracca's role is going to change too much from what we've seen in years previous. Again, I'm hopeful that he gets forward status. It would be a nice string in the bow for the large fries and Coke keeper side, but I'm quite realistic as well. I don't expect there to be huge changes to either of their roles, actually, Parish or Petracca.
Yeah, I love that name as well, by the way, large fries and Coke. So good pun there, mate. But yeah, with Petracca, I guess we'd all love him to get forward status, because if you've been living under a rock, then you wouldn't know. But as we all know, our forward line is very barren. We don't have many of those preem options when you look at all of them, like your McRae's injured, Flan's got an early bye, Dylan Moore's not playing, Dusty's got an early bye. Like this, list keeps like Caleb Daniel. People aren't sure about what his role is. So it's all those preems that we're not sure about. So it would be good if we almost had that one. Well, on one hand, it's good that we don't have any, because it makes it such a open game. But then it wouldn't be a bad thing for us if we could just have one player like Petracca and go, yep, put in the forward line. But hopefully you can get that potentially in round 6 or round 7 whenever the DPPs come. I think it's round 7 this year.
Yeah, round 7. I thought Jack McRae might have been that guy. I think in the summer, when the season launched, everyone was picking him. Everyone had confidence that he was going to be 100 plus at worst. But yeah, as the season gets closer and he hasn't played much footy, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of those other top line forwards that have some issues. So I think that's forcing a lot of coaches to rethink their structure slightly, bat a bit deeper in the midfield or defence, maybe pay up for one of the premier ruckmen. But I think, yeah, when it comes to starting with Christian Petracca, you wouldn't want to pick him with a big hope that he gets forward status. You'd want to pick him and make the selection knowing that he's going to be one of your top 8 midfielders for the entire season. So if he gets forward status, that would be a plus. But yeah, like I said, I think I reckon it's going to happen one year. Maybe I'm just continually trying to talk it into existence. But yeah, I don't think it'll be 2024.
Yeah, and it's a good point you raised as well, because some people might be going, "Oh, I want Petracca because he might get forward status," but it is a dangerous game to be starting players. I guess maybe in the, like we talked about yesterday with Amon and Martin, is that maybe they're two of the guys that are the most likely to get DPP, and we've heard about it, so they're probably a little bit different because they've trained all season halfback.
Exactly,
we still don't quite know about Amon yet because he hasn't played in a game we haven't seen yet, but we'll get a chance this week to see him. But Martin, we saw play halfback. He plays halfback again, you'd expect him to get halfback. Whereas Petracca, we don't know. We're relying on him to be resting forward at least 35% of the game just to get forward status. So, but yeah, this is why these two players are interesting, because we're sort of not quite sure because they're in that sort of weird price break. But the time has come to pick between the two players. So, Fry, mate, if you had to pick between Darcy Parish and Christian Petracca, who would you be picking in fantasy for 2024?
I think if you take away the early buy, I'd probably side with Petracca. Like I said, I don't think that his role is going to change a lot. I think that he's going to be a premier gun for Melbourne for the entire season. Durability is huge. But I'm going to side with Darcy Parish. I think that he has potentially some small room for improvement. If Zach Merritt goes down, he may become a tag threat. But if he's running alongside Zach Merritt, I think that he will go back to averaging his 30 touches, 4 tackles, 4 marks, which will probably see him get back to a pretty close average to what he's produced last year. And I just feel a little bit safer with regards to Parish's role. Like I said, we don't know. Melbourne love to potentially deploy players a little bit all over the shop. We talked about I think there's also more, what's the right word? There's more up for grabs this year for the Ds. Like, their premiership clock is ticking. They won one a couple of years ago. I think that they'll be wanting to really hammer home this window to try and win another premiership. And in doing that, maybe we do see Petracca get forward status and he becomes a 95 to 100 averaging guy playing off the half-forward flank. I don't think they have the depth in the midfield to do that, but you never know. Whereas with Darcy Parish, I don't think he'll be playing anywhere else other than on the ball, around the stoppages. He'll be tackling, he'll be marking, not a ton, but he'll be getting his hands on the footy a lot. And I was a little bit concerned that, don't know why I had in my head that Parish was a bit handball happy, but as you look back through his numbers, it's pretty even split.
Pretty even, yeah.
Handball to kick ratio. So I think if you took out the early buy, I might slightly side with Petracca, but that does make it easy for me to pick Parish and feel pretty confident that he'll be 105 plus this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going Parish. I think I'd probably almost go Parish even if the buy was a factor, but obviously it's another thing just sort of to cement that I'd pick Parish over Petracca with that early buy. I just think that, I think that he's never going to be tagged. Petracca is always a risk of being tagged just because of how damaging he is. I think he's such a difficult player to tag, but I just think that Parish is safer to get 110s most weeks, whereas I think Petracca can get anywhere from, I think Petracca's a safe 90, but there's a lot of games where he gets high 90s, or he'll go 120. You don't see as many of those 105 to 115 scores for him. So I like having that guy in the Darcy Parish where you're banking on that sort of around that 110 sort of score each week. And saying that, can you get to that 110 average? I think Parish, if everything goes right, I think can go 110. I don't know if he goes 115, but if he could reach that 110, 111, 112, but I almost think Petracca's almost capped at 110 just because there will be games where he plays forward a little bit more, or there will be games where because Oliver will be back in soon, he'll be the one dominating him and he'll get like a 130. Petracca might get a 110 or a 105 or something. So, I think Parish could be the guy he would be the guy I'd be picking out of the two. Have you got currently any of them in your classic side? Obviously, you mentioned you got Petracca in your keeper league, but have you got any of them in your classic side at the moment, or have you considered either of them?
I have actually considered Darcy Parish. As I said last year, he was a very convenient pod to have in the back half of the year. There weren't too many other coaches jumping on him. So I have looked at him. But at the moment, the way that my team's structured up, there are other premium midfielders that I think I have a bit more faith in. I've either gone up to some of the names we've already talked about or down for a little bit of value potentially. But he is someone that could squeeze his way into my side. Petracca, I don't think I want to. I've got a couple of players with that early buy that I think are top line players in each position. So if I tried to squeeze Petracca in, it probably would look a bit and feel a bit clunky. So yeah, Parish is someone that's in consideration, but currently sitting out. 17 days out. I'm sure once I finish this episode, I'll go and make some tweaks and changes and find room for him and then change my mind again 12 hours from now.
Yeah, mate, that's exactly what happens in the preseason. We're always chopping and changing with our players. I don't have either of them in my side. I don't think I'll start with either. It's just Parish I've considered at times, but I sort of find it hard that I find 20k I can get Rory Laird, 30k I can get Andrew Brayshaw. It's sort of, he's in that sort of weird price bracket. If I started Laird and Parish, they're too much of a similar player, if that makes sense. They're very consistent with their numbers, so I'd probably just want Laird and just go get an LDU or a Steele or something like that. Like, I'd have him already in my team, but I'd rather someone that's probably got a bit more upside next to a guy like a Rory Laird. But yeah, that's how I'd be signing with that. But that is the end of another head-to-head episode. Let us know in the comments below if you're picking Darcy Parish or Chris Petracca in your fantasy side for 2024, or let us know your thoughts on Parish and Petracca and who you would be picking out of the head-to-head battle today. Any other questions? Well, leave them in the chat. Don't forget to like and subscribe and do all the good stuff if you're listening on the podcast. 5-star rating and review would be very, very much appreciated. It does help out a lot. But Fry, mate, thank you very much for jumping on this head-to-head episode. Where can the people find you across socials? Where can people find you doing all your sort of the rookie articles on a certain website that I write for as well? And then where can people find the podcast that you've got going on?
Yeah, my pleasure, mate. Again, thanks for having me. It's good to talk about some left of field options. You know, I think the name Nick Dacos and Tim English have been mentioned 1,000 times this preseason, so it's nice to give Parish and Petracca some love. But yeah, as you mentioned, Sports by Fry is where you can find all my bits and pieces. And tomorrow, before we get Collingwood and Richmond, I'm actually dropping my big preseason watch list for the rest of the 17 days we've got before round one on the Dream Team Talk site, talking about all the rookies for all 18 clubs. Worth bookmarking that article so you can check back at it and look at the relevant names throughout the year as well.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I'll be definitely. I've got to check that out, mate. You're one of the rookie experts. So we've got also we can people from the podcast as well.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the spaces usually find it. I'm primarily a Spotify user and listener, but yeah, it's available on all your platforms, listener, etc. You type in Sports by Fry, FRY, and you'll find it.
Yeah, cool. Now make sure you guys go and check that out if you haven't already. In the episode tomorrow, I've got another special guest. We're going to be talking about, it's going to be headlined by probably the most talked about defender who you mentioned before. Well, he'll be in the episode tomorrow, potentially, or maybe not. Might be alongside another player. Who knows? You'll have to find out tomorrow on the next episode of Head2Head. But until that episode, we'll catch you guys later. We're out. Cheers.